This weekend, it was our turn to host the party, something we do roughly every 6 weeks. Our little circle is made up of 6 people, 3 couples, who usually rotate hosting at our homes. The regulars include Emily's friend Rachel and her husband David, along with our neighbor Claire and her current husband Evan. Occasionally, others might drop in, but the 6 of us form the core group. We're all in our 20s, and none of us have kids, whether by design or chance. Rachel and David made a deliberate decision not to have children, while Evan has 2 kids from his previous marriage who live with their mom. He's actively fighting to gain custody. Our get-togethers usually revolve around food, drinks, and some kind of theme. It could be playing cards, catching a game on TV, or, if we're at Evan's place, taking advantage of his pool when the weather's nice. The women, especially Rachel and Emily, take the reins when it comes to planning these gatherings. They coordinate through phone calls to make sure everyone's free on the chosen date. Emily, in particular, loves chatting and exchanging gossip over the phone. She's got a knack for pulling off well-organized events. Emily is a curvy woman with wavy, light brown hair. She has a flirtatious streak that sometimes makes me want to pull my hair out. She loves attention, and while it gets under my skin occasionally, I've always believed she stayed true to me. I'm originally from a small coastal town in Oregon, where my family still lives. After earning a degree in finance from a state university, I became a certified financial planner. Though I'm naturally more introverted, I found genuine satisfaction diving into topics like money markets, statistics, and economic history. My father, a respected figure in the insurance business back home, helped me gain credibility when I first started out. I was named after my dad, Michael Carter, but I go by MC. I began my career by renting office space in his building, meeting with clients to discuss my balanced, growth-focused investment strategies. While I was affiliated with a national firm, I also conducted my own research, which was one of the most rewarding parts of my job. My first year in the business was decent. I managed to deliver solid returns for my clients, often beating market averages. Sharing an office with my dad meant I inherited a few of his long-standing clients, and I made it a priority to build relationships with them. By my second year, though, I started to realize that the opportunities in our small city weren't enough to meet my financial ambitions. With my background in economics, I knew I had to look beyond my hometown to really grow. For this latest party, the weather was perfect, so we decided to host it outside on our large terrace, which has a barbecue and an open kitchen setup. When I asked Emily about the theme for the evening, she said we'd be playing a lively game that promised to spark some friendly competition and keep the energy high. That worked for me. As long as there was good food, drinks, and maybe an extra glass of wine, I'd be happy. What game? I asked her. Don't worry about it, MC. I'll handle it. You just focus on the barbecue, she replied. That was fine with me. I turned my thoughts to the people coming over. First, there were Rachel and David. Rachel had been Emily's friend since their middle school days. She's a bit on the heavier side, but carries it well. Her figure is, let's say, noticeable. She has a habit of showing off her assets and revealing tops, a habit I've had to veto in Emily's wardrobe more than once. David works as a diesel mechanic in a big shop downtown. He's an easygoing guy, someone you can sit down and have a beer with without any drama. Despite Rachel's tendency to flirt, David seemed immune to it. A tall guy, probably around 6 feet 3 inches, David was decent enough, though I doubted we'd be friends if it weren't for Emily and Rachel's long-standing connection. Then there were our neighbors, Claire and Evan. I honestly couldn't recall how we got so close. Claire had a pretty unremarkable face, but her figure was impressive, slender and naturally lean, a stark contrast to Emily's fuller curves. She was sharp, and oddly enough, I found we shared the most common ground in the group. Evan, on the other hand, was a golfer, slim, and probably about 5 feet 9 inches. There was a certain arrogance about him that rubbed me the wrong way at first, but over time, I learned to tolerate it. Trusting him, though? That was another story. Still, he brought a lively energy and quick wit to our gatherings, which kept things entertaining. Before long, the doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of our guests. Meanwhile, my mind wandered to the plans I'd been making for my financial practice. I decided to expand by relocating to the city and joining a firm there while keeping my coastal town clients. The idea was to spend 1 week each month back home, staying with my folks while meeting with those clients. So far, the transition was going smoothly. In the city, I shared an apartment in the Trinity Maples neighborhood near downtown with my old college buddy Brian Kim, an IT specialist for a big bank. The area was vibrant and youthful, filled with walkable streets lined with bars, restaurants, and shops. It was during a night out at one of these bars that I first met Emily. She worked at Lucas, a sleek restaurant and bar nearby, and I was immediately struck by her. To me, Emily was the epitome of sensuality, like a Playboy bunny brought to life. She had a stunning figure and knew exactly how to dress to show it off, especially behind the bar, where she exuded effortless charm. She seemed genuinely interested in me, asking about my life, career, and dreams. I'll admit, her interest surprised me. I'm just a financial planner, after all. Back in high school, I dated a sweet, smart girl named Lisa Harris. We tried to keep things going through college, but it fizzled out. After that, I had a few casual flings, but never anything serious. The night I met Emily, I almost asked her out right there but hesitated, afraid of rejection. "Man, she's smoking," Brian said, noticing how I couldn't take my eyes off her. "You into her? You should ask her out." "You think so? Better act fast before someone else does." The next evening, I went back to Lucas alone and finally asked Emily out for a Sunday date. That's how it all started. I was nervous at first. Emily was the most beautiful woman I'd ever been with, but she made her interest in me clear from the start. It wasn't long before things got physical, and let me tell you, being with Emily was like stepping into a whole new world. Despite having been with a few women before, I was practically a beginner compared to her. Emily knew things, intimate things, that I'd never even imagined. Her body was breathtaking. Soft curves in all the right places, just the perfect balance of femininity. I often wondered about her experience, but I never brought it up. It felt like opening a can of worms better left closed. Whatever doubts I had, they were dwarfed by the joy she brought me. That evening, we sat on the back porch, having finished dinner and working on our second, or maybe third, glasses of wine. I'd been talking with David about his ambition to move into a managerial position at the diesel shop where he worked. He mentioned going to church with the owner to make a good impression. I told him to think it through carefully, warning against insincerity. As we chatted, Rachel piped up, "So, Emily, what's the plan for tonight?" Emily grinned. "Okay, hear me out. This is just for fun, so keep an open mind. We're playing truth or dare." I internally groaned, but David, Rachel, and Evan cheered enthusiastically. Emily flashed a quick smile at me before turning back to Rachel. David and Evan were all in, while Claire gave a faint, somewhat hesitant smile. The game started innocently enough, light questions and dares with a suggestive undertone. Stuff like, "Who's your celebrity crush?" or "What age did you lose your virginity?" But then Evan, always ready to stir things up, singled out Emily for a dare. "All right, Emily, I dare you to lose either your shorts or your top." "Hold on a second," I interjected. "Are you sure about this? You're not wearing much under there, are you?" "It's fine, MC," Emily said casually. "I've got underwear on. It's like a swimsuit." Emily thrived on attention, and this was no exception. While I admired her confidence, I didn't love sharing her allure with the rest of the group. Still, without missing a beat, she peeled off her top, revealing a lacy white bra that left little to the imagination. Her chest moved gently as she stood, basking in the reactions of Evan and David. Rachel giggled, egging her on. "You go, girl," Emily said, clearly enjoying the spotlight. Though I felt a pang of discomfort, I didn't say anything. Things escalated when Rachel, emboldened by Emily, revealed her own bare chest to the group. Unlike me, David cheered her on enthusiastically. Everyone laughed except Claire and me. I finally spoke up. "One more round, and then maybe we call it quits on this game." There were a few protests, but most agreed. Then it was Emily's turn, and she chose Evan for a dare. "All right, Emily, hit me," Evan said, grinning. "Show your package for 10 seconds, Emily dared with a mischievous glint in her eye. "Don't you dare," Claire snapped, glaring at Evan. But Evan, always the provocateur, stood up, unzipped his pants, and dropped both his shorts and boxers. He stood there, 6 inches flaccid and not exactly slim, putting on a little dance that looked more like a cheap male stripper routine. Both Emily and Rachel turned to look at me, their expressions unreadable. I was too stunned to react, while David burst out laughing. Emily seemed mesmerized, her eyes fixed on Evan's display. Claire, however, had seen enough. "I'm done," she declared, her face flushed with anger. "Evan, you can either get dressed and come with me, or walk home." Without waiting for a response, she stormed out, leaving the rest of us in an awkward silence. That was the end of the party. The guests quickly dispersed, and as Emily and I cleaned up, she was unusually quiet. I decided to break the silence. "That went a little too far, don't you think?" "Oh, come on, MC. Lighten up. It was just harmless fun," she said with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Harmless fun? People were undressing, Emily. You included." She grinned mischievously. "I'll show you undressed," she teased, beginning to peel off her clothes. I turned away, feeling torn between physical satisfaction and a gnawing unease about the evening's events. I resolved to have a serious conversation about boundaries the next day. This kind of behavior wasn't something I could just brush off. It crossed a line for me. The next morning, I got up early for a run, using the time to gather my thoughts. I planned to tell Emily how much I valued having fun together, but that certain things, like our bodies, should remain sacred to our marriage. This wasn't negotiable for me. When I returned, Emily was on the phone, laughing. As soon as she noticed me, her laughter abruptly stopped, and she lowered her voice. I thought I heard the word undressing before she turned away. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just Rachel," she replied with a giggle. "She and David said last night was the best party we've had yet." "Well," I said, "I think we need to talk about last night, especially your behavior." Emily rarely got upset, but my comment seemed to strike a nerve. She dismissed my concerns, saying it was all innocent fun and that no one else had a problem with it. I tried to explain my feelings calmly, emphasizing that I wasn't trying to stifle her, but she didn't want to hear it. When she lashed out, I let the matter drop for the moment, heading out to do some yard work and sort through my emotions. I didn't feel like I was being unreasonable. I loved Emily for who she was. Her free-spirited nature was one of the things that drew me to her. But when it came to intimacy, I believed it should be exclusive. The idea of other people seeing her in such a way didn't sit right with me. I'll admit, I sometimes wondered if I measured up. Emily was stunning, the kind of woman who turned heads wherever she went, while I saw myself as a pretty average guy, a financial planner from a small town. Sure, I stayed in shape, but she attracted attention from all kinds of men. I trusted her, but there had been moments in our relationship that made me pause. We'd been dating for a few months when one incident in particular gave me cause for concern. Back then, I thought we were exclusive, though we hadn't formally discussed it. To me, Emily's declarations of love went hand in hand with commitment. It was December, and we were headed to a party that was more upscale than our usual gatherings. When I saw Emily's outfit, my jaw nearly hit the floor. She was wearing a red dress that barely covered her chest. "You like my dress?" she teased, twirling for effect. "Emily, you look amazing, but wow, that's, pretty revealing," I managed, feeling my face flush. She narrowed her eyes. "What's that supposed to mean? You think I look trashy?" No, I stammered. "It's just that, well, I might have clients there, and it's a bit much." Emily rarely got angry, but comments about her appearance were a surefire trigger. She accused me of being ashamed of her, and it took some time to calm her down. Eventually, I apologized, and we headed to the party with her wearing the dress. The house was stunning, perched on a hill and decorated to the nines for the holidays. The place was filled with people, including some of my colleagues, old acquaintances, and members of the sports club I belonged to. One guest in particular stood out, Anderson, a guy I vaguely remembered from college. He was the epitome of charm and arrogance, with his slicked-back black hair and constant smirk. He strutted around the party like he owned the place, champagne glass in hand. When Anderson spotted Emily, his eyes lit up. She drew attention wherever she went, most of it directed squarely at her cleavage. While Emily stayed attentive to me at first, I couldn't help but notice the stares she attracted. For a while, I was the center of attention, with colleagues and acquaintances suddenly eager to talk to me because of Emily. It felt odd, but I didn't mind. At one point, I stepped away to grab a drink, and when I returned, I saw Anderson deep in conversation with Emily. He was leaning in, completely absorbed in whatever she was saying, as if I didn't exist. I managed to pull Emily away, but as the party went on, we inevitably drifted apart again. I found myself in a group discussing business ideas, which was great, until I realized it had been over an hour since I last saw her. I quietly searched the living room, kitchen, and adjacent family room for Emily, but she was nowhere to be found. Anderson was missing too. A knot tightened in my stomach as I stepped outside into the brisk winter air, where a small group of people was smoking. No sign of her there either. Then, as I was heading back inside, I heard her laughter coming from the street. Looking out, I spotted Emily strolling down the sidewalk with Anderson. They were chatting and laughing like old friends, and it made my blood boil. "Hey, honey, Jim was just showing me his new BMW," Emily called out when she saw me. Anderson added a quip about the car, smirking like he didn't have a care in the world. Emily's hair was slightly mussed, but she didn't look out of place. Forcing a smile, I swallowed my frustration. "I'm heading out. Do you need a ride?" "Of course, I'll come with you," she said, looking a bit surprised by my abrupt decision to leave. As we turned to go, Anderson slapped me on the back, grinning. "Great seeing you again, man," he said, extending his hand. Fueled by anger and indignation, I took his hand and gave it a firm shake, perhaps a bit too firm. Anderson winced, his smug demeanor faltering. "Jim, you're hurting him," Emily exclaimed, startled. "Sorry," I said curtly, releasing his hand and heading straight for the car. Emily hurried to catch up, and we drove off in tense silence. That marked the beginning of our first major argument. Usually, I adored Emily, her beauty, her charm, and our connection. But I also knew she craved male attention, and that insecurity gnawed at me. When we got to her place, she invited me to stay the night. I declined, still stewing over the evening's events. "Nothing happened with Jim," she said, her tone defensive. "We were just having fun." "Well, that's enough excitement for one night," I replied flatly, driving off without another word. Over the next week, Emily called and texted repeatedly, but I ignored most of her attempts to reach out. I focused on work, burying myself in client meetings and projects. I even left for my hometown a day earlier than planned, using the weekend to reconnect with my family and refocus on my goals. The time away was productive. I made significant progress with clients, built momentum in both my coastal and city businesses, and started gaining recognition within my organization. But my personal life? That was a different story. By the time I returned home, Emily's messages had slowed, though she still checked in. On Friday evening, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Opening it, I found Emily standing there in a raincoat, holding a wrapped gift. "This is for you," she said, handing it to me. I opened it to find an antique skeleton key. "You have the key to my heart," she declared dramatically. Before I could react, she slipped off the raincoat, revealing lingerie that looked straight out of a teenage fantasy. Any resolve I had melted away in an instant. Later, I asked her directly about the night with Anderson. "I know I shouldn't have gone out with him," she admitted, "but he was just showing me his car, and he's harmless. Nothing happened." "So he flirted?" I pressed. "Yeah, a little. But I've been dealing with guys like that since I was 15. "I can handle it," she said matter-of-factly. I confessed my jealousy and told her I wasn't the type to play games. "I'm either in a committed relationship or not. If you're not ready for that, I'll understand, but I need clarity." She assured me of her love and commitment, and any lingering tension dissolved as she pulled me closer. Emily had a way of making things right, at least temporarily. The following week, we hosted another Truth or Dare party, and Emily seemed more attentive to me, steering clear of behaviors that had made me uncomfortable in the past. She was still her playful, alluring self, but more mindful of my feelings. Or at least she appeared to be. One Saturday, while working in the yard, Evan stopped by. It wasn't unusual since he and Claire lived nearby. What started as a casual conversation about lawns and gardening shifted into Evan opening up about his custody battle and how much he missed his kids. His vulnerability caught me off guard, softening my previous judgments about him. Then, out of the blue, he asked, "Where's Emily?" "She's out shopping," I replied, steering the conversation back to his custody situation. Not long after, Emily appeared, darting into the yard in a skimpy bikini. She headed straight for the sunbathing screen I'd set up for privacy. Emily loved tanning, and her minimal attire didn't surprise me. Evan, however, made a noticeable effort to catch a glimpse of her. I decided it was time to wrap up our chat and escorted him to the gate. As he left, he called out jokingly, "Need any help with the suntan lotion, Emily?" That moment brought back memories of Anderson. Things had been better since that incident, but I couldn't help the occasional flash of unease. For now, though, I chose to focus on the positives. Emily seemed more attentive, and our relationship felt stronger. At least, that's what I told myself. Our relationship shifted to a new chapter after that. I guess, in a way, I rationalized Emily's past behavior by reminding myself that at the time, we hadn't formalized our commitment. Not publicly, anyway. But now, we were deeply invested in each other. Emily was affectionate, caring, and a joy to be around. Did we have the kind of deep, soul-searching conversations I'd had with other girlfriends? Probably not. But we shared plenty of fun and excitement, and physically, she was unlike anyone I'd ever been with. On top of that, she was breathtakingly beautiful, and I felt a rush of pride whenever we were out together. She had also started dropping hints about our future, questions about where we were headed and what long-term plans might look like. It got me thinking, too. I always saw myself as a Camry kind of guy, practical and reliable. But with Emily, I felt like I'd somehow ended up behind the wheel of a Porsche. Part of me questioned if she was truly the right match for me. Was this whirlwind of enjoyment just a phase? But another voice in my head countered, "Are you crazy? Every guy dreams of being with a goddess. What's your problem?" In the end, the deciding factor was simple. If I walked away from Emily, could I ever find someone who measured up? Both emotionally and physically, she was unmatched. And then there was her body, those perfect, spectacular curves that left me in awe. So, I proposed. Along with the ring, I surprised her with tickets for a Caribbean getaway. Her reaction was priceless. She was ecstatic. She loved the ring, and the trip, set for just a few weeks later, only heightened her excitement. Emily called her mom in California to share the news and had a long chat with Rachel. Meanwhile, I phoned my parents to let them know. They congratulated me, though my dad's tone carried a hint of hesitation. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "Absolutely," I replied. "Why? Is there a reason to doubt?" No reason," he said. "It's just a big step. Emily's a wonderful girl, and I'm very happy for you." I thanked him, but later, I couldn't shake the feeling that he was holding back. The Caribbean resort was stunning. It featured a gorgeous swimming pool, multiple bars and restaurants, and a private beach with everything from loungers to umbrellas. There was even a beach sports hut for kayaking, jet skiing, and other activities. On our first day, we changed into swimsuits for a walk along the beach. Emily had packed 3 types of bikinis: hot, snug, and micro. Teasing her, I said the micro one was strictly for me. "We'll see," she laughed. She wore the hot bikini with a sheer white wrap that left very little to the imagination. As we strolled along the white sand with drinks in hand, the clear blue water lapping at our feet, I felt like the luckiest man alive. People couldn't help but notice Emily, men and women alike. The admiring glances only made me prouder to have her by my side. That evening, after a casual dinner at the poolside bar and a couple of strong rum drinks, we retreated to our room. The view from our balcony was breathtaking as the sun set. Slightly buzzed, we stood together, Emily leaning against the railing. I approached her from behind, my hands tracing the soft lines of her shoulders. Before long, my hands found her flawless curves. She sighed with pleasure, and as the moment intensified, we forgot about the world outside. The applause that came from somewhere nearby startled us, but only added to the thrill. The resort staff were incredibly attentive. They made sure we had everything we needed: towels, food, drinks, directions. Then there were the beach boys, young men in their early 20s who worked the loungers. Their job mainly involved catering to older women who enjoyed the extra attention, but Emily's stunning bikinis drew them like moths to a flame. One day, I suggested Emily try jet skiing. "You go ahead," she said with a smile. "I'm working on my tan." So, I signed up for an hour-long session and had a blast speeding across the waves. When I returned, exhilarated and ready to relax, I spotted Cruz, one of the beach boys, hovering over Emily. As I got closer, I saw his hands massaging her bare back, his fingers grazing the sides of her perfect curves. "What's going on here?" I asked, keeping my voice calm but firm. Cruz jumped back, looking flustered. "Mr. MC, I didn't want Miss Emily to burn. She needed sunscreen," he stammered before scurrying away. "Emily, what was that about?" I asked, leaning in so others couldn't hear. She waved it off. "Oh, honey, relax. He was just helping. Sure, he might have grazed the sides a little, but don't worry, they're reserved for you." Her words both reassured and, oddly, excited me. Despite my annoyance, I found myself unable to stay upset. I suggested we head back to the room, my mind racing with desire. I draped a towel over myself to hide my arousal as we walked back. Later, we began discussing wedding plans. On the flight home, Emily drifted off to sleep while I reflected on what an incredible trip it had been. Yet, the image of Cruz's hands on her lingered in my mind, like an itch I couldn't quite scratch. By the time the weekend rolled around, and Evan came to stay with us briefly, life had settled back into its normal rhythm. Work kept me busy but satisfied, and my financial research and investments were performing steadily. Emily continued working at Lucas Bar, mainly taking lunch shifts as a waitress. She didn't need the job financially, but she enjoyed it and valued the independence it gave her. Her schedule meant we spent most evenings together, which I appreciated. As summer approached, Emily and Rachel began planning the next couples gathering. After the last truth or dare fiasco at our house, I hoped these parties would fade away soon. But after much back and forth, it was decided that Evan and Claire would host the next event, a pool party set for mid-July. When Emily mentioned it, I immediately asked her to leave the bikinis she'd worn in the Caribbean out of the mix. "Why not wear something red instead?" I suggested. To my surprise, she flat out refused. "Those bikinis are for strangers, not for friends," she said firmly, and that was the end of the discussion. Just days before the party, I received a panicked call from my mom. My father had suffered a heart attack and was in the county hospital awaiting bypass surgery. I assured her I'd come as soon as possible. I packed an overnight bag for Emily and me, and we left immediately. Though I was deeply concerned for my father, I was also worried about my mother. She had always leaned on his strength, and I didn't know how she'd cope with him in a vulnerable state. When we arrived at the hospital, we found my mom in much better spirits. It turned out that my father's heart attack had been minor, and the bypass surgery was a success. The doctors were optimistic about his recovery, and they planned to discharge him by Thursday. I stayed with him overnight while Emily and my mom returned to the house. They came back the next morning, and we spent most of Wednesday in the hospital. My father was in good spirits, working on a crossword puzzle when Emily and my mom walked in. Though the day was uneventful, Emily was polite but noticeably restless. Hospitals can be dreary, after all. On Thursday, after my dad came home, I told Emily I needed to stay a few more days to help my parents adjust. I suggested she take my car home and either pick me up over the weekend or let me borrow my dad's car for a bit. "No, I'll stay with you," she insisted. "Thank you, Emily. I appreciate it," I replied, "but it's better if you go home. They need to settle in, and I just need to be here for them a little longer." Reluctantly, she agreed and left Thursday afternoon. I spent the rest of the day running errands, helping my mom, and watching baseball with my dad. It was a quiet but meaningful time, and I cherished it. On Friday, Emily called to ask when I'd be coming back. I told her Sunday at the earliest. "What about the party?" she asked. I had completely forgotten. "Oh, right. Sorry, honey, I won't make it. Are you planning to go?" "I'm not sure," she said. "Rachel wants me to, and Claire's sister and her boyfriend will be there." Knowing there'd be newcomers eased my concerns about things escalating like last time. "Okay, let me know what you decide. I'll call you tomorrow." By Saturday, My dad seemed a little off. I suspected he'd overdone it on Friday and needed rest. After he fell asleep, I took care of some household chores to help my mom. She encouraged me to take a break, but I stayed busy, tackling one project after another. Suddenly, I noticed it was nearly 10 p.m. I grabbed my phone and called Emily. "Hey, what's going on?" I asked, hearing commotion in the background. "Oh, hi, honey," she said, laughing. "I'm at Evan and Claire's. We're having a good time." "How's Dad doing?" she asked, but before I could answer, I heard a high-pitched scream followed by Emily's laughter. "What's happening?" I asked, my stomach tightening. "What, honey?" she replied, her voice muffled by more laughter. "How much have you had to drink?" Dear, the connection's not great. Can I call you later?" she said quickly, as more laughter erupted in the background. Then I distinctly heard Evan's voice. "Take off that top, too." Laughter and muffled chatter followed, and then Emily's voice cut through. "Oh, this is getting even hotter." Her phone seemed to disconnect, but it was clear this wasn't an innocent gathering. I debated whether to drive home, but it was already past midnight, and I was exhausted. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. That's when I remembered George Bennett. George was a retired neighbor who kept an eye on our house and knew the neighborhood inside and out. He was reliable, if a bit nosy, and I decided to use that to my advantage. I called him and explained the situation, asking if he could swing by Evan and Claire's place and discreetly snap some pictures of the backyard. George was more than willing to help. After giving him the details, I thanked him and powered down my phone for the night. If there was trouble brewing with Evan, I wasn't ready to face it then and there. Physically and emotionally drained from worrying about my father, I slept soundly that night. When I woke up the next morning, I powered on my phone to find a message from George Bennett with photos attached. I hesitated before opening them, knowing they would likely confirm my worst fears. The first photo hit like a sledgehammer. Emily, completely naked, with Evan standing nearby, his intentions disturbingly clear. The next image was worse. David, unclothed and clearly aroused, grabbing Emily's chest with no hesitation. The third photo captured Emily and Rachel, both naked, provocatively dancing for Evan and David like performers in some twisted show. The final image shattered me completely. Evan and David engaging in carnal acts with Emily, leaving no doubt about her betrayal. I couldn't look any further. The photos were more than enough evidence to destroy the last shred of trust one had in her. I'd ignored the warning signs, convinced myself that Emily's flirtatious nature was harmless. But now, the truth stared back at me in vivid detail. A fog of disbelief and numbness clouded my mind. I needed to process what I'd seen but couldn't focus. I told my mom I needed to get some air and stepped outside. "Everything okay, MC?" she asked, concern evident in her voice. "Yeah, Mom, just need a little walk," I lied, unwilling to burden her while my dad was still recovering. I wandered for hours, replaying the images in my mind, trying to make sense of what Emily had done. I cried, I fumed, and I began to plan. When I returned home, I'd made up my mind. This marriage was over. My next steps were clear: protect myself financially, uncover the full truth, and deal with Evan and David. Emily called me around noon, her tone sugary sweet. "I miss you so much." "Your dad's not the only one who's going to miss you when you come home," she said with a playful laugh. It took everything in me not to explode, but I knew I needed to stay calm. I had to outthink her. "Dad's condition isn't improving as fast as we'd hoped," I lied. "I'll need to stay another week to help out, and honestly, it's probably best if you don't come. It might be too much excitement for him." Emily bought the excuse without hesitation. "Oh, okay. I miss you, though," she said, her voice tinged with disappointment. By Monday evening, I made my way to the city and called Brian, my old college roommate, asking if I could crash at his place for a while. He was surprised but didn't hesitate to offer me a room. Once I was there, I showed Brian the photos and explained everything. He was stunned. I knew Emily could be a flirt, but this? "I had no idea," he said, shaking his head. I vented my frustration, outlining my need to protect myself and my desire to expose Emily and her so-called friends. Brian agreed to keep everything confidential while I figured out my next move. The next day, I waited outside David's workplace. He had mentioned once that he was gunning for a promotion, and I knew his boss was a devoutly religious man. When David walked out toward his truck, I waved him down. "Hey, David, let's grab a beer," I called out casually. David hesitated, clearly caught off guard, but agreed. We drove to a no-frills bar nearby, the kind of place frequented by mechanics and laborers. Once we had our drinks, I got straight to the point. "So, how was Saturday night?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Just another party," David said with a shrug, not meeting my eyes. I pulled up one of the photos on my phone and slid it across the table. "Really? Because this doesn't look like just another party." David's face went pale. "Look, man, what were we supposed to do? She started it. It didn't mean anything." "Oh, sure. Completely harmless, right? Now, how do you think your boss would feel about this harmless behavior?" David's demeanor shifted immediately. He stood up, but I rose too, meeting him head-on. When he made a move as if to intimidate me, I swung first, landing a clean punch. David crumpled to the ground like a sack of flour. I helped him up, brushing him off. The whole scene happened so fast that no one in the bar even noticed or cared. David, now visibly shaken, started mumbling apologies and deflecting blame. "Save it," I said, cutting him off. "You're going to answer my questions honestly. If you don't, or if you tell Emily or anyone else about this, those photos go straight to your boss. Got it?" David nodded. Fear etched into his expression. Over the next hour, he spilled everything. David, Rachel, and Emily had known each other since high school, where their group represented a mix of social classes. Emily and Rachel had come from less privileged backgrounds, often ridiculed for their old clothes and beat-up cars. But as they grew older, their looks became their ticket to popularity. Emily, with her striking beauty, and Rachel, with her voluptuous figure, quickly realized the power they held over their wealthier peers. According to David, both girls lost their virginity young, viewing their physical appeal as a way to level the playing field. David also told me that Emily had always been upfront about her ambitions. She wanted luxury, designer clothes, nice cars, and a beautiful home. To her, those things mattered more than love, and she wasn't afraid to trade intimacy for material gain. The final blow came when David revealed that Emily had been seeing someone else when we first started dating. "She told Rachel you had better prospects, but she kept the other guy around for about 3 months before breaking it off," he admitted. "So she was with both of us for 3 months?" I asked, my voice cold with disbelief. "Yeah, man. That's just how Emily is," David said with a shrug. I leaned back, the weight of everything sinking in. The woman I thought I knew was a stranger, someone willing to lie, cheat, and manipulate for her own gain. "Since you two got married, I know of at least 2 other guys she's been with, besides Evan and me," David added, almost nonchalantly. I leaned in, my curiosity mixed with disgust. "Who?" I asked sharply. David scratched his head. "One was a guy named McCallum, or something close to that." "She said you knew him." It hit me. Anderson, that smug fool we'd encountered at the party before our marriage. My blood boiled at the thought of him and Emily together. David, meanwhile, remained indifferent, casually sipping his beer. It was clear there was no salvaging this marriage. I needed a way out, clean, decisive, and with minimal damage to myself. "So, let me ask you this," I began, my tone even. "If a guy with more money, a better car, and a nicer house came along, do you think Emily would leave me?" David didn't hesitate. "Pretty sure she would," he said matter-of-factly. I mulled over his words, the implications gnawing at me. What about Claire? Was she involved in all this? David shook his head. "Nah, Claire left early. Her sister's boyfriend caused a scene, so she took her sister home. She doesn't know what went down after that." "Let's keep it that way," I said. David smirked but didn't argue. "Doesn't it bother you that Rachel sleeps with other men?" I asked, genuinely curious about his perspective. "Partner?" David scoffed. "We're not married. She just calls me her husband, 'cause we've been together a while. But when I do get married, it won't be to someone like Rachel. She's great. I love her in a way, but she's not wife material. That's why we don't have kids." With that, I decided it was time to leave. My head buzzed with all I'd learned. Emily's betrayal was even deeper than I had imagined. Her attachment to me was purely transactional, rooted in the security I provided. And David, dense as he was, seemed to have a sharper understanding of Emily's nature than I did. Back at Brian's apartment, I unloaded everything I'd learned. My anger bubbled to the surface. I feel humiliated. How many of them have laughed behind my back? They need to pay, I fumed. Brian listened quietly, then nodded toward his laptop. I've got an idea, he said. He typed furiously for a moment before turning to me. Can you get your hands on $30,000? And maybe lease a BMW for 6 months? What for? I asked, though a glimmer of hope flickered in my chest. Brian grinned. I've got a plan. He outlined it. His younger brother, Christopher Reed, would play the role of a wealthy, charming New York banker. His mission? To woo Emily, appeal to her materialistic side, and expose her for who she really was. Christopher Reed had a natural charm, long hair, a lean frame, and a magnetic smile. He was exactly the type Emily would fall for. She'll like him, Brian said confidently. Christopher Reed leaned back in his chair, studying me. I've got to ask, man, do you care if I sleep with her? She's your wife, after all. I shrugged, my voice bitter. Do what you have to. It's not like she's been celibate these past few months. 5 days is probably her max. We finalized the details. I gave them Emily's work schedule, emphasizing discretion. Christopher Reed needed to play his role convincingly, and I had to maintain my facade of a clueless, devoted husband. The first week passed uneventfully. Emily and I continued our routine, though I could sense an emotional distance growing between us. Physically, nothing had changed. Our intimacy was still as passionate as ever, though it felt more like a competition than an act of love. By Thursday, I was eager for an update. At Brian's apartment, Christopher Reed recapped his interactions with Emily. I went to the bar 3 times, he began. First time, I just made eye contact. Second time, we chatted a little, light conversation, a few jokes. By the third visit, she told me her schedule and mentioned she'd be working lunch the next day. I'm planning to show up around 2 for coffee and maybe some food. The next week crawled by. I kept a close eye on Emily, noticing small changes. She came home later than usual one evening, though she explained it away as a busy shift at the bar. I tried to stay calm, waiting for Thursday to hear the latest. When the day finally came, Christopher Reed had more to report. We had coffee on Friday, he said. She admitted she's married, but hinted at problems in the relationship. She seemed interested, though. I suggested lunch on Tuesday, and she agreed. I also started dropping subtle hints about money, just enough to pique her interest. Hearing this, I felt a mix of vindication and sorrow. As the days went on, Emily and I drifted further apart. I tried to engage her in conversation one evening while she cooked dinner. How was your day, honey? I asked, studying her reaction. Busy at work, she replied nonchalantly, not even looking up. I knew she was lying, but I played along. We talked about nothing of consequence, and I felt the distance between us widen. Our physical relationship remained the same, intense, almost mechanical, but emotionally, we were miles apart. Looking back, I wondered how long I could keep up the act. The physical aspect of my relationship with Emily had always overshadowed the emotional connection, so faking affection wasn't difficult. To make things easier for her, I mentioned needing to help my father and told her I'd be leaving Friday afternoon. She half-heartedly asked if she should come along, but I reassured her it wasn't necessary. I explained I'd be helping out and staying the following week to meet with clients. That Thursday evening, I received an update from Brian. Christopher Reed's plan was advancing rapidly. A simple Tuesday lunch had escalated into a passionate encounter. Learning that I'd be out of town, Emily and Christopher Reed had arranged to meet again on Friday night. It felt surreal, like I was orchestrating their affair behind the scenes to serve my own ends. But it was working. As the weeks passed, their relationship deepened, culminating in a romantic weekend getaway while I visited my parents. Predictable. Back home, Emily began to grow distant. It was subtle but noticeable. Her demeanor had a tinge of melancholy. Occasionally, glimpses of the woman I'd fallen for would surface, evoking a pang of loss. But I knew better than to be swayed by nostalgia. 3 months later, Christopher Reed professed his love and proposed to Emily. She believed he was a wealthy New York banker with a luxurious Manhattan penthouse. When asked about me, she admitted our marriage was faltering but avoided discussing divorce outright. A few weeks later, Emily mentioned a spa trip to California with Rachel. I knew better. Christopher Reed had invited her to Sun Valley. "You'll love it," I encouraged, masking my true feelings. That night, Emily rewarded me with particularly passionate lovemaking, and I couldn't help but marvel at how little she suspected. Christopher Reed proposed again during their Sun Valley trip. The cubic zirconia ring, costing under $500, looked convincing enough. Emily, convinced of his wealth, accepted without hesitation. By Thursday, I received confirmation that Emily planned to ask me for a divorce, eager to marry Christopher Reed as quickly as possible. When Emily broke the news, I put on the performance of a lifetime. Shock, heartbreak, and desperation. "We're married. I can't let you leave. We can work this out," I pleaded convincingly. Meanwhile, Christopher Reed continued to woo her, promising security and wealth. He pushed for a swift divorce, urging her to finalize things with me as quickly as possible. Eager to move on, Emily agreed. On Friday night, she came home waving instant divorce papers in hand. "I'll waive my rights to everything. The house, the car, your investments. I just want to move on," she declared confidently. Feigning devastation, I yelled and cried, begging her to reconsider. "I need time to process this. Please give me some space," I implored before retreating to the basement. There, I signed the papers, sealed my assets, and let her believe she'd won. Emily left the house that night without gloating, her stride confident and determined. By mid-September, the divorce was finalized. Emily forfeited her claims to my assets and set her sights on marrying Christopher Reed in New York by the end of the month. That Thursday, Brian and I finalized the next phase of our plan. Emily was to move her belongings to a luxury condo Christopher Reed had supposedly rented in New York. On Friday, Christopher Reed would meet her with a truck to help move her things. But the condo's lease was set to expire, and by Saturday, it would be re-rented. Christopher Reed, whose last name had been fabricated, would be untraceable. Emily would be left stranded, broke, and utterly humiliated. On Friday, as Emily packed, I resisted the temptation for one last fling. She dressed to impress, thinking she was heading for a glamorous new life. By noon, she tried calling Christopher Reed, only to be met with silence. "Can I use your phone?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Sure," I said nonchalantly, watching as she encountered the same result. Frustrated, Emily left to find Christopher Reed. I didn't hear from her until the weekend was over. By then, it was clear she discovered the truth. The final phase of my plan involved delivering poetic justice. I mailed photos from Emily's scandalous party to key recipients. David's boss, with a note reading, "A person's character reflects in their work. Do you want this kind of morality in your shop?" Evan's ex-wife, accompanied by the message, "This is what your ex is up to. Thank goodness the kids are with you." Claire, with the line, "Looks like you missed the most exciting part of the party. You deserve to know." I signed each note with my name and phone number. The fallout was swift. David not only lost his promotion but was fired outright, leaving Rachel behind. Evan faced a custody hearing, where the photos undoubtedly played a role in him being denied custody and slapped with higher child support. Claire called me one Saturday, furious and distraught over the revelations. "Evan's headed to your house," she warned, her voice trembling. "He's drunk and armed. Be careful." I prepared for the confrontation, setting up a decoy figure in the backyard while I hid in the bushes, armed with a baseball bat. Evan arrived, yelling and firing a shot at the dummy before I sprang into action. One swing to his arm disarmed him. Another to his legs sent him crumpling to the ground. The police arrived shortly after. Evan was arrested and charged with attempted homicide. "Thank you for the warning," I told Claire later. "You're welcome," she replied. "Now, about that drink you promised?"